Yeah. I know at some point they're going to ask about that. No, a different one. Because he hates politics. I don't even know how to use it. I mean, we did it once. Like approaching. Just moving that all. And this one does some interesting things, including permission enrollment available now. Really? Why don't we do that? I thought he was asking. Because things might be entered correctly.
I think the prescription changes at the time, but my left foot is still fine. Right?
Mine were for years worse. I made a work for years to try to stop it. So just waiting for the bishop to close visit too. So
That's the thing. You're something that eventually fires something. At this point, this is why cancel that. That's just entirely sticking to the She could be right because of the There's no range for me in this morning because I'm sticking to the system. It's terrible.
in here, I'm waiting for that.
I mean, you can see how much it's sticking.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's just
It's a 45 degrees.
That's a call on board.
Oh, is it? No, it's way up.
Well, I mean, it's that long, but it's negative.
Yeah, but just
This is the FCC.
Oh.
They have the authority to say that's what I'm gonna say.
Some of those who ran over the ground, FCC.
Yeah, they have a timeline on here.
I can't think there's ever a described thing as well.
But it will be. Because they just adopted it on this. So that will be coming out.
I just can't imagine how
Pretty sure.
eventually when everything comes
Yeah.
So welcome everyone. Thank you for coming. You're all here for the ransomware discussion, right? Well, I'm Michael Lane. I'm a field solutions architect with CDW. I'm not going to be using the microphone because it's tethered and I don't like to be tethered. So can everyone hear me all right in the back? Okay, if you have any trouble hearing me, wave or let me know or something to that effect. So just out of curiosity, who here is a teacher? Raise their hand. Okay, interesting. Thought we might get a few in here. But this is more a little more technically focused. So we're going to be talking about the tools and techniques that you can be using to stop ransomware in your environments. So we'll go ahead and get started. So I've been in security now for about 15 years doing various types of security, both physical and information type security. Most recently I've been focused in network security though. We're more focused on those tools like I was talking about. We've had a lot of conversations about ransomware recently. It's been a very hot topic. We've had a lot of school districts that are getting hit with it. And so we came up with this conversation to try and help you all prepare for what might be going on. So I had a really good week last week. I was on vacation. Got to sit on a beach a little bit. My friend was getting married. It was a good time. I got to talk to his aunt. You know, you meet new people and talk to them. And she worked for a local government. And she was telling me about they got hacked recently. And I said, oh, what kind of hack did you have? She didn't really know. She just knew stuff wasn't working. But I did a little investigation and found out that they had gotten ransomware. So it's kind of depressing. I can't even go on vacation without having a ransomware conversation anymore. But that's the state of the world we're in, unfortunately. Gotta turn this clicker on. So on the agenda for today, we're going to do an overview of ransomware, just to kind of talk about what ransomware really is and make sure we're all on the same page about that. We're going to talk about TrickBot and Ryuk, which is a combination of ransomware we've seen a lot recently, especially in the school districts. We're going to talk about your people and processes and things that you might want to focus on when it comes to your people and processes for stopping ransomware. We'll talk about our top 5 recommendations of things that you can do to fight ransomware in your environment, because we know that school districts often have limited resources, limited personnel. So what are the things you should really be focused on to try and stop that ransomware? And finally, we're going to have a Q&A panel with a few people from around Pennsylvania, myself and my colleague Dino, to answer a few questions about ransomware. So what is the impact of ransomware been? Well, in 2019, it was $12 billion. That is a lot of dollars that are affecting people across the country. What's really interesting is in 2018, we predicted there would be a fall off in ransomware. We thought ransomware was going to start bottoming out. We thought we had a good handle on it. But in fact, we started to see an increase last year in 2019. 118% growth in the first quarter of 2019. The average ransom went from $12,000 to over $36,000. Now those statistics do include the very small one-off ransoms as well. So that's why that number is kind of low. School districts are usually held for a much, much higher ransom than that. 10 days of average downtime for these ransomware attacks. So what happens if your school district is down without internet, without access to resources for 10 days? It's not going to be a pretty scenario if that happens to you. Interesting tidbit about ransomware. There is a 96% customer satisfaction rate in ransomware, in that if you pay the ransom 96% of the time, organizations get their data back. These ransomware distributors, they want to have good customer service because they want you to tell people you paid the ransom and you got your data, and therefore everyone should pay the ransom so they get their data back. They even have call centers sometimes set up to help you out when you're wanting to pay that ransom. It's interesting, in the past there's actually been competition between these ransomware groups where one ransomware author copied another one's look and feel, essentially, only they weren't actually giving anyone their data back, and they actually started fighting among themselves to keep their customer satisfaction high. It's a crazy world. Average cost per security breach in education is $4 million at this point. By the time you pay a ransom, recover everything, and get your organization back up and running. So we're talking about a lot of potential money if we don't stop this stuff from happening. Sometimes the attitude, though, is the easiest thing may be to just pay the ransom. Someone from the FBI had this quote here, but a lot of people do pay the ransom. The FBI doesn't really take an official stance on paying a ransom or not. They'll usually recommend you don't, but there is no official stance from the FBI. But most industry professionals do not recommend paying the ransom because they do want you to be a repeat customer. We've had multiple districts that get hit with ransomware and they've actually paid the ransom, and then 3 months later, they're hit with ransomware again. So paying the ransom isn't going to do much but make you a repeat customer for these people. So I wanted to cover the different types of ransomware we're seeing out there because there are different variations out there. The first of which is just lock screen ransomware. This is pretty simple. It just pops up on your screen and says your computer has been locked, you might have done something illegal or something to that effect. It's got a nice FBI logo there so you know it's official, and you need to go somewhere and type in a code in order to pay your fine to the FBI. If only the government worked that efficiently that you could just pay fines that simply and quickly. That should be your first indication that this is not legit, is it's way too efficient to be an official government message. Next, we have master boot record ransomware. This will actually encrypt the entire hard drive. You can't even get into the operating system once this is on your system. The most common type is what we call the basic encrypting ransomware. So this will encrypt all the files on the operating system itself, and you can still access the operating system, but you're presented with a screen that tells you what you need to do to pay that ransom. And you can't get to any of your personal files on the system. And finally, something we've seen a lot more of recently is what's known as doxware. And this is essentially a way of blackmailing someone into paying a ransom. So they basically say, hey, we took the files from your computer, we uploaded them to our servers, and we're going to distribute them or do something with them unless you pay us. So this affects a lot of industry because of intellectual property being stolen, and also can affect individuals that might have files on their computers they don't want shared with the world. And when they do threaten this, they will say, hey, we're going to send it to everyone in your address book too sometimes. So definitely a threat to a lot of people. So how does ransomware spread? Well, the biggest way it spreads is through email. I think it's somewhere around 80% of malware now goes through email. Phishing is the #1 thing now. Phishing is everywhere. Everyone is being targeted with spear phishing campaigns now. So there are groups around the world now, Russia, China, and other countries, where they will do research even on smaller organizations now, look these organizations up on their website, find out who works there, to craft very customized phishing emails now to try and get people to click and download ransomware and other malware into the environments. Another way is what we call malvertising. So there are people that inject malicious software into legitimate advertising networks. So there are advertising networks out there. They do not always do a good job of policing the advertising on their own advertising networks. And it's possible you might see something like that your PC is infected to scan now. My mother got one of these actually recently. My mother got one of these and she called the number up and said, okay, well, what do I need to do? And they said, well, we need remote control of your computer. And she said, well, maybe I should talk to my son about this. And they said, no, and that's when she became suspicious that there was something wrong. Open RDP to the internet. So we see school districts a lot of the time, for ease of use and convenience, might have remote desktop ports open to the internet. We have had districts that have gotten compromised through this, either from a security compromise in RDP or a simply brute force attack trying to log into these systems. So if you have any RDP ports exposed to the internet right now, please after this go back, take those down, do not let RDP out to the internet. SMB is another one that is a common attack vector for ransomware, where they'll try to find file share out there, find vulnerabilities in the protocol, and try to get ransomware in through that. So again, no SMB shares on the internet, hopefully. And finally, through DNS compromise. So we see sometimes these attacks come in through systems where they've actually compromised DNS, and they redirect users to the websites they want them to go to. The user might not have any idea. But DNS is another threat vector that we're seeing. And we'll talk about ways of protecting against all of these as we go through this presentation. Some more characteristics of ransomware. It's going to use very strong encryption. It's the same encryption that you use every day to encrypt your data at rest in your environments. At least hopefully you're encrypting your data at rest. They often will scramble the file name, so even if you have an encrypted file, you have no idea what that file once was. They do things to delete the backups and shadow volumes on shadow copies on systems so that you cannot restore from your backups. They conveniently have multiple formats and languages. They will do localization. They'll detect where you are in the world and present to you in your local language so you can conveniently pay that ransom. They might have time limits and countdown clocks to put the pressure on you to not involve the police, not involve the FBI or someone. And they'll say the longer you wait to pay the ransom, the more you're going to have to pay. Now that infected PC is also a botnet. So once they have the ransomware on the system, it's not just ransomware. They can do whatever they want with that PC. They could take the data off that, upload it to their cloud. They can sell it as a botnet. So it's not just doing ransomware. There's a lot else going on these systems when ransomware is happening on them. They also have some evasive characteristics where they actually try to hide from you. We've seen ransomware out there that will actually remain dormant until it's ready to take action. We see that a lot more with crypto mining software, which we'll talk about in a moment, where if a user is on the system, it hides and doesn't do anything, so no one notices a system performance impact, but the user walks away and it starts doing its activity. They use encryption of command and control traffic to evade the firewalls and things of that nature. They often try to use Tor and Bitcoin to pay the ransoms to maintain anonymity. They also do a lot of tricks with DNS and domain generated algorithms where they're actually constantly changing the domain names to try and stay away from URL filters and things that might be filtering by domain. So crypto mining is ransomware's cousin. A lot of you might have heard of crypto mining before. This is very similar to ransomware in that it's malware that is installed on your computer, but instead of holding it ransom, it might actually be mining for Bitcoin. So using your processor and your electricity to mine for Bitcoin. There's actually been a really interesting trend that's been noted recently, and it has to do with the price of Bitcoin. When Bitcoin gets above $10,000, we see a lot more of the crypto mining software as opposed to ransomware. When Bitcoin drops below $10,000, we see a lot more of the actual ransomware again because it's not as profitable for mine for the coin as opposed to actually demanding money for the ransomware. So TrickBot and Ryak. This is again some ransomware we've seen a lot recently, and we just want to walk you through the process of what happens in a ransomware attack so you can understand where the traffic is flowing and the potential places we could stop the ransomware. It usually starts with a user. They get an email perhaps that says, this is the attached invoice that is due. Please open this so that you can see your invoice. The user, trying to be helpful and do their job, opens the invoice. They might see something happen, nothing might happen. The user says, well, that's weird. They might go about their day. They might report it to you, hopefully if they're a good user. That doesn't always happen though, unfortunately. But unbeknownst to the user, their PC is now infected with whatever this is. Now, the ransomware has not actually really started yet. Right now, we're still in the kind of the initial infiltration phase. So the workstation becomes compromised, and then that workstation might actually start to fan out to other workstations in the environment. One way that happens is through an unpatched system. There was a known vulnerability, 1710, it was in the SMB service that we were talking about earlier, and so this could potentially automatically spread to other PCs in the environment. We'll talk about patching many times. This is why patching is important. So if one thing does get infected, it can't easily spread everywhere else. So so it's now spreading through our environments. Eventually, it's going to reach out to its command and control servers on the internet. And this is traffic that we could potentially detect because it's now reaching out to say, okay, we have control over these computers. What do you want us to do next? The hackers, they do their little happy dance up there because they now have somewhere that they've gotten in. And they start doing research and reconnaissance. Now they might lurk in your network for days, weeks, or even months. There are sometimes examples of this where they are in the environment for months at a time, just poking around, trying to get elevated privileges, learn about your environment so they can prepare for what they're going to do next, which is actually the Ryak encryption package. So using their command and control servers, they send commands out to say, okay, it's time to encrypt everything. Now they are the only ones with the decryption keys, and everything in your environment could potentially be compromised. And again, they don't normally just send out a package to a single workstation in cases of schools and things like this. They'll sit in your environment doing research and reconnaissance to try and own as much of the environment as they can to put you in the most desperate situation possible. So the next day you get to school, and what do you see? You see something on a workstation. It's a nice message here. There's a couple points I like to point out. You should thank the Lord for being hacked by serious people, not stupid schoolboys or dangerous punks. They can damage all your important data just for fun. So they are letting you know they are professionals. Your data is in good hands, so you don't have to worry. Additionally, as soon as we get Bitcoins, you'll get all of your decrypted data back. Moreover, you'll get instructions how to close the hole in security. So not only are you going to get your data back, they're going to help you improve your school's security on the network. Now, they might give you a piece of information of how they got in, but they now know everything. They know every problem you have, and they will want you to be a repeat customer. And we've seen this a lot in school districts, and not just in school districts, but in commercial as well, where someone pays a ransom and then 3 months later, they're victim of ransomware again, because they do want you to be a repeat customer. So you can't trust them when they say they're going to patch the holes for you. Go figure. So, what security solutions should you implement? There are literally hundreds of security vendors out there, thousands of security solutions. Where do you even begin talking about this stuff? The technology is actually kind of the easier part. So where I like to go next is talk about your people and your processes. This is really where you need to start focusing to stop ransomware, is how you control your environment, educate your people, and the processes that you have in place to assure that this stuff doesn't affect you. One of the big ones is software patching. So you need to have a good patching cadence in your environment, keeping all of your Windows up to date, your Macs up to date. But beyond that, you also need to worry about all the software that's installed in the workstation. So things like Adobe Flash, which hopefully will be dying this year. Chrome's going to stop supporting it soon, so Adobe Flash is probably going to go away, which is probably good for all of us because it was well known for its vulnerabilities. Adobe Acrobat Reader oftentimes does have vulnerabilities in it, and you need to keep it patched constantly. Java is another one that's a little bit notorious. And also things like web servers, any software that you have in your environments. So a couple years ago, do you all remember the Equifax breach that happened about 2 years ago? All of our social security numbers were hacked away. That was an unpatched web server. If Equifax had been patching things regularly and keeping up on their routine maintenance, that breach probably would not have happened. But because they let an unpatched server sit on the internet, someone was able to gain a foothold in their environment and then spread through the rest of the environment. Now, passwords and trust relationships. So this is an interesting one. So I always like to tell a story here about trust and what's known as arbitrary trusts. So imagine, if you will, there was a bank. I think this bank was in Texas, but they, pretty big bank. One day someone comes into work, notices there's something like $10 million gone. They investigate it, and it was legitimately transferred out by a user. They talk to the user, and the user says, well, I didn't do this. I don't know how that happened. I didn't authorize that wire transfer. So the bank starts doing some investigations. They bring in multiple incident response firms. They end up having to bring in 3 firms to confirm what happened. I would like to say CDW was a 3rd firm, and we figured it out, but we were not any of the 3. But they did some investigation. And side note, down the street from this bank is a really good Vietnamese pho restaurant. I know everyone over here know what pho is. It's Vietnamese noodle soup. It's tasty. There was a Vietnamese noodle restaurant down the street, very popular with the people at this bank. One day, at the front desk, menus showed up saying you can now phone in your orders for the soup, and it will be delivered. So the people working at that bank started ordering, call it up, they'd get their soup delivered, it was good. A few weeks later, a new paper showed up. They now had online ordering, even better. People started ordering the soup online. the soup would show up, everything was good, and everyone was happy. Well, the restaurant had no idea that they had delivery now. It was actually a pretty elaborate setup that a hacker had set up. They actually paid people in cash to do deliveries for them. And so how did this result in $10 million getting out? Anyone want to hazard a guess? What was that?
Payment information.
Not payment information. This is the idea of an arbitrary trust. What happened was sorry?
They use the same password for the online
Right.
or-
So the employee of the bank used the same, they used their corporate email address and the same password in order to set up their account for that online site. And this is actually something that's very common, that probably happens in your districts all the time, where people are using their district email and they use the same password for whether it's online ordering or a fly fisherman website or something like that. And this is the idea of an arbitrary trust. And one of our goals should be to get rid of this. And we do that by making our users' lives easier. Let's start out just talking about passwords in general, though. So, is this a good password? Is this a good password?
Secure, but
Well, if you can remember it, that's not easy to remember, so I'm probably going to write this one down on a sticky note or something like that. What about this password? Is that a good one? But it's multiple characters, it has numbers and capitals and letters and symbols. That's a good password. No, really. So there's actually some really excellent password tools out there. So we have a pretty big hacking team at CDW. Whenever we go in to do a penetration test, we can almost always guess someone's password, and a lot of the time it's based on the local sports team, or in the case of a school, whatever the school mascot is. We have various combinations that are very well known, and simply by using those combinations, we can get into accounts because people are very predictable in how they do their passwords. There's combinations such as the mascot, or spring 01, spring 02, fall 01, things of that nature. So we've made it really hard for people to remember secure passwords. One thing you can do to help alleviate this is single sign-on, because that's fewer passwords for people to remember. What about that? Is that a good password at the bottom? Hopefully you can all see it there. So this is actually the best password on the screen, right here. This is actually the hardest for a computer to guess. That's actually pretty easy for a human to remember. And I was reading a report actually, I think about yesterday, 2 days ago now, the FBI has finally come out and recommended using passphrases over passwords, because they're a lot easier to remember. Hopefully your users could remember that and not have to reuse it and not reuse it everywhere because it's too complicated. And hopefully they won't have to write it down. Now, another item that we have been talking about a lot more across the board with schools and all of our customers are password managers. We are recommending password managers a lot more now, so you give your employees and your staff the ability to have a tool that will help them remember their passwords. One of the very important things for your password manager, if you do use a solution like that, or for any of your critical systems, is two-factor authentication. Now, this is something that is becoming more and more important. We still don't see a lot of school districts implementing two-factor. It's probably unlikely you're ever going to implement this for your students and their access to everything, but this is very important when it comes to any remote access for teachers, accessing the student information systems, accessing payroll, financial systems. We highly recommend putting that behind two-factor authentication when you can, because that eliminates if they reuse their password, it no longer matters because the person's not going to have that second factor of authentication. So implementing tools like password managers and two-factor authentication will go a long way to helping make your environment a lot more secure. Another example of an arbitrary trust is the Windows administrator password. Do a lot of you have Windows machines in your environments? So one thing that happens a lot in environments is you have the same administrator username and password on all of the systems. What that does is if someone compromises the first system and is able to get that password, they can then move throughout the environment to other workstations in the environment. If you haven't heard of it, look into the Microsoft LAPS tool, LAPS. It is a free tool from Microsoft that will help you manage all of your local usernames, administrators, and passwords, and so you do not have to reuse the same local admin password. So Microsoft LAPS, check it out, it's a good tool. So what happens when a hacker does get in your environment? What are they going to do exactly? So we talked about those hackers earlier moving throughout the environment. They start on the initial workstation. What they try to do next is they then try to elevate their privileges, either on that system or by moving lateral to other systems, to eventually hopefully get domain admin privileges or become an administrator of some sort on the network, at which point they will spread out through their entire environment and take over your servers, your network gear, everything they can get their hands on. The question is, who do you want doing this in your environment? You don't want the black hat hackers doing this. If they're doing this, you're owned. You're going to get ransomware in your environment. You also have to face the possibility of the gray hats. These are your students. These are your ambitious students that maybe they want to go into computer science someday. Maybe they want to be hackers themselves, and they might start poking around your environment and seeing what they can do. What we recommend is getting the guy on the far left, the white hat hacker, into your environment first. Conduct penetration tests. Bring someone in, a third party, to assess your environment and start working through the environment like this. Not only to find those vulnerabilities, but to educate you on what could be going on in your environment right now. Another big point is logging and incident response. What happens when you do have a breach in your environment and you bring in an incident response team? The first thing they're going to do is ask for your logs. My friend, a colleague of mine, Michaela, came up with this. We call this Michaela's hierarchy of logging. A lot of, I gotta get this out now. I never get to use this thing. A lot of schools and organizations are down here at the lowest level. Tier 0. You have the default logging running on things, default logging on your firewalls, default logging on your switches. If there's an event, security breach, you might find some logs in the environment. You might not, of what the incident was. Logs go a long way in tracing what happened and being prepared to take action on that. Next, at Tier 1, we have off-device logging. This might be a syslog ng server. You're just sending all your logs off to a server somewhere. You might have a retention period you're shooting for. You at least hopefully have the data in that case. Next, we have what we call the Tier 2, whereas a tool like Splunk or Sawmill, it might not automatically correlate the logs, but it's going to give you HTML reporting and better views. It might even have some alerting that you can set up to let you know when something's going on. Where we start getting really interesting, in a lot of schools, again, we don't see them at this level yet, is Tier 3, where we have SIEM and SOAR. That's security incident, event management, and security orchestration, automation, and response. SOAR is kind of a new term if you haven't heard that one before. But basically, it's automated tools to take action in the event that certain logs happen or certain events occur. And finally, at the top, we have trained humans. They're really the ones that can help you take the best action in all of this. Now, a lot of districts obviously can't have your own trained humans monitoring your logs all day necessarily. There are third-party services that can do this very well now. It's offered by a lot of different vendors with things like endpoint detection and response. So your endpoint vendor might have a solution where they will monitor what's going on the endpoints and then let you know when they see something happening. The same thing for MDR, which is managed detection and response, where you might be able to send your logs to a third party, and when they see something going on, they'll filter it for you and let you know so that you can then take action. The other important question, though, is what is your plan for when this happens? Who here has an incident response plan in their environment for if they have a security breach or other incident? Okay, there's a few hands going up. This is one of those things that nobody thinks about until it happens. Is you come into school, everything is down. Who are you going to call? What are you going to do? These are things that you should be working on planning ahead of time. There are groups and services out there that can help you come up with this plan and come up and determine what you want to do. So we've been talking about phishing quite a bit. Phishing is the number one way people are getting into environments at this point. Funny story, or fun story I should say. I used to work for a company that was a tech company, and this was back, I think, in the late 2000s. There was no phishing testing or anything going on. They started doing phishing testing. 80% of the users click the phishing links at an IT organization. 80% of the users. And these are IT people that will click that often. The organization started doing user education, and they were able to get that down to around 4 or 5%. Now, you're probably never going to get it below 4% of users clicking on phishing links, because 4% of your users are going to click on everything no matter what. You just have to watch them very closely. But it's very important to understand phishing and its implications, and the fact that it's getting more and more sophisticated. And people will get emails that look legitimate, emails with fake headers that might have the same name as their administrator or superintendent that looks very legitimate, asking them to transfer money somewhere, asking them to take action. People want to be helpful. People like to help each other. They want to do their job and help out their colleagues when they can. And the fishers will, fishermen, I guess, is fisherman a term? I'm not sure. They will feed on that. And they will feed in that good nature of humanity. So if you did want to do your own phishing campaign in your school, how would you do it? You don't want to focus on the IT folks, or if you have a risk management group. I don't know a lot of districts that do, but those are the people that kind of know about this stuff and would notice it. But you probably would want to focus on your staff and faculty and the teachers to try and help them get the education on this. It's important, you want to create good custom phishing emails. A good one is to always say, you're implementing a new security policy. Of course, you're sending this from an illegitimate email address, so it's not really coming from you. They don't know that though, or hopefully they do. Hopefully they will look at the email closely enough to realize it's not actually coming from you. Make sure you set up your firewalls and get past the content filters for this. One of the biggest phishing days of the year that's actually really interesting is Amazon Prime Day is actually one of the biggest phishing days of the year, because everyone's buying stuff on Amazon Prime Day. It is a great opportunity to send someone an email saying, oh, there's a problem with your order. Click here for more information. Now, another very important factor in all of this is training and testing. So we talked about the phishing. Providing training to your users is really what's going to help prevent them from clicking on things. There's a lot of good stuff out there. Now, hopefully, or not hopefully, usually there are service days for teachers or professional development days that you might be able to get some time in to get them for 15 or 20 minutes to do some sort of education on phishing. The tools are a lot better now. The education is a lot better. It's interactive and give instant feedback for people to understand what they should be doing. Training and testing, it goes well beyond though just training the teachers about phishing. You want to make sure your own IT staff is trained. You might want to engage with someone to do a red team or a tabletop exercise where they simulate an attack on your environment and how you would react, and to get training on how you could react. Okay, so jumping back to TrickBot and Riot in our scenario, where are the places we could have stopped this from happening? So we could have stopped it right there with email security and phishing protection. If we had had good email security, we could potentially get rid of that phishing email immediately. If we didn't stop it there, we could stop it at our user by providing good user education, as we were talking about. If we have strong next generation endpoint protection, that could stop it from infecting the workstation. We could actually stop it between the workstation and other systems by having network segmentation in place. Now that's getting a little bit more advanced. Most school districts aren't implementing full network segmentation, but it is an option to stop it from spreading. We can also stop it from spreading with good patch discipline. So having a plan when Patch Tuesday comes around, having a test group, having someone designated in your organization to monitor the patching and make sure things are getting patched. We can also stop it from reaching out to the command and control servers with strong next generation firewalls and DNS level filtering. So you can see, stopping ransomware, we have all these opportunities to stop it. You're not necessarily going to put tools in every one of these spots, but we do have all of those opportunities. Oh, finally, I forgot to mention, we can also recover from an event by having solid backups in place. So the idea would be, hopefully, if ransomware gets on this first workstation, that's where it stops. You have one workstation that's encrypted, you restore it from backup, everyone goes on with their day. So what are our top 5 recommendations of what you can do to secure your environments? Number 1, implement strong next generation endpoint protection. I'm throwing out a lot of logos and a lot of vendors here. I'm not going to tell you which one's the best, which one is the one you should do. You should do research into what will work best in your environment. But the important thing is having the tool in place. The free Windows Defender is not enough. The free Windows Defender is not going to stop ransomware. Microsoft does have add-ons with the ATP packages, the Advanced Threat Protection, that it can be a good product, but if you're relying on the free Windows Defender, it is not enough to stop the ransomware in your environment. Our second recommendation is implementing DNS filtering. So what this is a tool that will filter all of your DNS queries going in and out. And why is this effective at stopping ransomware? Because 91% of command and control traffic can be blocked at that DNS layer. So when something gets infected, it's going to start doing DNS queries to reach out and say, hey, what do I do next? If we can block that traffic, it's going to stop that from being downloaded. It can also stop people from clicking those links. If someone clicks on a ransomware link and we have DNS protection in place, it could stop them from being able to actually download the ransomware itself. Another one is we recommend is getting those white hat hackers in your environment and conducting some sort of penetration testing. There's different assessments out there that you can do. There's things like rapid security assessments that might be smaller in scope and focus only on a certain segment of your technology. We can do comprehensive security assessments that might look at the end-to-end security of your environment, including things like password cracking, guessing those easy to guess passwords for you, and letting you know which users have those easy to guess passwords. There's also application security assessments. So this is actually if you have a student information system or perhaps some custom software that you have and you want to test its security, there are options out there for actually viewing into that. I mentioned earlier developing your own policies and procedures. So bring in third parties to help you develop those procedures. And if you can't bring in the third parties, go to Google. There are things out there that can help you, like the CIS Top 20. There are places to start that are pretty simple for developing your own policies. Frameworks and controls and gap analysis. There's a lot of good frameworks out there, as I mentioned. You can start there and start comparing yourself to the frameworks to see where you lay. And finally, doing those tabletop exercises can be very valuable. So actually doing a real-world scenario with a third party to try and test yourself in your environment. Our fourth recommendation is educating your users. So this is an interesting statistic. 77% of threats require user intervention. Your users have to do something 77% of the time to get things like ransomware in your environment. If you give them the tools to understand what ransomware is or what malware is or what a suspicious email looks like, you can stop it from getting into your environment. There's a lot of good vendors out there with very good phishing education materials available. Our fifth recommendation is implementing strong patch and backup discipline. So again, in your organization, you want to designate someone as the person that's going to be in charge of patching. So when Microsoft Patch Tuesday comes along, they have a designated group of workstations they're going to test it on, and then a week later push it out to the entire environment. You also want a tool for inventorying all the software on your workstations. So for instance, there's some endpoint protection software now that will inventory all the software for you, let you know the patch levels, and let you know when things are out of date. So you can at least be aware of it and then take action to patch that. Something that you can do proactively to look in your environment is talk to us with doing a CDW threat check. So this is no cost. So this is something you don't have to pay for. We send you a box that's running Cisco Firepower, Splunk, Tenable's vulnerability scanner, and Carbon Black endpoint protection. It sits off a span port on your internet connection for a week, and at the end of that week, you get a detailed report of any bad stuff we saw going in and out of your network. For example, so this is what the top results that we see from that when we run these for different organizations. The biggest thing we find is that crypto mining that I mentioned earlier. A lot of people have crypto mining running in their environment, and they have no idea. A lot of clear text credentials going in and out. Anonymizers, people using cloud storage they might not be supposed to use, and active known malware in the environment. We also kind of identify weaknesses, so it comes with a survey that you fill out, and we let you know where you might have some other weaknesses as well. Another thing that we offer that's a little bit more reactive is a zero-cost incident response retainer, where in the event that it's zero cost up front, Most incident response retainers are going to cost $20,000, $30,000 up front to put someone on retainer. Ours is no cost up front. You just pay by the hour when you do have an incident. It gives you someone to call and assist you with things like incident triage, containing the incident, and getting an incident response report of what happened in your environment. So I kind of like to summarize it here if anyone wants to take a picture of this one. This is our top 5 recommendations summarized of what we'd like to see you do in your environment to try and stop ransomware proactively. So I think we'll be making this available after the presentation as well, but if anyone wants to take photos, you can go ahead. Okay. So that is the main bulk of the presentation. We're now going to bring up a few people, panelists that have volunteered to kind of talk about their experience with ransomware. So if everyone wants to come up here, if I need to bring up a couple more chairs, grab one. These are all good. You like that? I'll just go ahead and shut this off for now. Myself too. I should say too.
Anybody have any questions about the whole subject?
Or
Yeah, so appreciate everybody's time this afternoon. My name is Derek Delamonica. I'm the Regional Sales Manager from CDW, covering Pennsylvania. If there's anything you'd like us to follow up with you afterwards, I saw that a lot of people taking pictures of the slides. You can catch up with myself, Michael Dino, or a couple members of my team. We'd be happy to get your info and circle back with you later too. So that being said, I want to jump right into some Q&As from your peers. Obviously, more of the leading experts in this than myself. So if you want to start down at the end and just kind of introduce yourselves, which organization you're with. I've got a few questions teed up for you, and hopefully we can jump right into it.
Okay, I'm Rodney Bobbin. I'm the Director of Technology for the Beaver Falls, New Brighton, and Rochester School Districts in Western PA.
My name's Dino Amato. I'm a Security and Field Solutions Architect with CDW.
Sidney Clark, Business Manager for Shanksville Stony Creek School District.
I'm Khalid Ayubov, Director of IT for Delaware County Intermediate Unit. Sorry for the complex name. Don't try to remember it.
Frank Tine, I'm the IT Director at Wimber Area School District.
and I'm Michael. You already met me. So.
Right. So yeah, Rodney, if you can give us your take on spear phishing experiences, anything you've recently encountered, I'm sure we'd love to kind of just hear the general overview here.
Yeah, my story is I just started. I worked at one school for a number of years. Superintendents got together and thought it'd be cool to share the IT director, which it was. It's worked out well. We've been able to, work together. There's a lot of benefits. So when I took over the one school, it couldn't have been within the first 6 months. I get an email from my superintendent, and he said, "Hey Rod, I think my email's been hacked." And I go, "It's Gmail, you have 2-factor authentication." I doubt it. So I went into Google Vault, I looked, and as soon as I saw the email, I saw exactly what he was talking about. Here, a spear phisher came into our district, and they picked out the payroll person. And this is what I call the perfect storm scenario. My superintendent's door is open every day. You can walk right in. "Hey Joe, can I get this? Can I get that?" This day, he happened to be with 2 solicitors, or solicitor and another guy. His office door was closed. The email went to the payroll person, and it said, "I need all the W-2s immediately. I'm working." Now, here's where all this training that they mentioned is a must, because she had all the classic symptoms. Does it feel right? She didn't send it right away. She got up, walked to the door, and all she had to do was just go, "Joe, did you want the W-2s?" She didn't. She went back to her office and said, "Oh, he must need them." Boom. Our W-2s for the entire district sent out. Just like that. And this isn't a person that did it maliciously. It was just that she didn't have training. And it's that old saying, you assume. So I went into a place and we've done that. They hadn't. So since then, we've implemented a full-blown phishing training campaign, videos, interactivity. And the first day that I sent it out, I got 60% of the people to click on the links I was sending them. We're now averaging less than 3. So if you don't think it can happen to you, think again. It really can.
Thanks so much, Rod. And Helene, I know you and I talked at length this week as well. Can you give us some of your background and experience on dealing with anything cybersecurity, ransomware related from all the multiple organizations that you've worked with?
Yeah, I had direct exposure to ransomware. It wasn't the public sector, it was a private job, private industry. We had roughly 7% of our computers encrypted, around 100 computers. And it took literally months to restore everything. It was a mix of computers and servers. And I kind of been learning cybersecurity ever since. Besides significant expense, you also need to understand certain things. And certain questions my districts ask me, what if my data is in cloud and I don't have to worry about ransomware, I can just restore it. Well, think about this, if 25% of your computers are encrypted, then you're gonna have to spend months of time to restore the computers themselves, because ransomware penetrates the system files, system directories, it makes your computers inoperable pretty much. So your best case scenario, if your data is in cloud, which is probably 1% of the population here, I would say, then you'll still look at the significant expense of restoring your systems. So I want to add, the presentation was really great. I met with the FBI last week, somebody from the cyber force, to kind of get an insight of what's going on in the criminal world. And what I've been told is, ransomware evolves. Now keep in mind, the bad guy's always one step ahead, right? So ransomware evolves in several directions. First is it turns into fileless infections, meaning that there are remote commands that have been executed against your network, so there are no files really planted. So your typical endpoint protection will not pick up anything. Because the way it works is it has a signature database. If file hits the system, it compares the file signature to its database. If there's a match, it's a virus. If there's no match, it's not a virus, but there's no file, right? Also, the new versions of ransomware that FBI is seeing now is also stealing data. It's not just encrypting it. So there are 2 scenarios here. The first is they ask for ransom twice. First is to restore your data. Second is to give you back your data, which is crazy, right? And there's no guarantee that it's not going to end up on dark web. If you're a public entity, and I don't know how many IT directors are here, but we are, as technology directors, responsible for this. And we have federal funding involved in our districts and other entities. And if someplace that happens, it's just going to put the whole organization in jeopardy. So my recommendation is learn as much as you can. Not all of us have fully developed cybersecurity teams. I can say probably only very small number of organizations, even in the private world, can talk about having a fully developed cybersecurity team. So use combination of vendors, whatever you can to secure yourself. Identify low-hanging fruits, implement those protections, create your presentations, take it to your boards, and make it happen. So,
thank you very much, Glenn. Appreciate it. Sydney, if there's any general experience on attacks or any opinion on how to formulate strategy that you'd like to share with the group, I'm sure you've got a few things to throw out there.
Well, we came back from Thanksgiving break to find we thought were normal after break activities, because there always seems to be a gremlin that comes in over a long weekend. To find out that every server that we had, as well as every user machine that was left on over Thanksgiving break, being all locked down because of ransomware. Being that we are the 5th smallest district in the state in student population, we only have 320 kids, pre-K through 12. You don't think that we're a big target for that type of group, but it ended up being, I didn't realize Windboro was in the mix as well, but that would make 4 school districts in our county that I would assume are all on the same Comcast IP network that we're all hit from Thanksgiving through Christmas break. In our scenario, we had enough machines where the hacker had enough time to hit our backup as well. So we did not have any external backup as far as user data, but we were we did find that we're an IT department of one. You have 320 kids, you only need one IT person, right? As the business manager, at least that's what I think, but no. We do outsource our second position to a local IT company, which was a very big savings for us in the sense that, you know, we pay for one person 1 day a week in addition to our full-time IT person, but that gives us the full company array of employees. So we were able to get their network specialist in right away. It took us a calendar week before we actually contacted the insurance company, got to a forensic investigator, got the hard drives from the forensic investigator, did all the necessary backups before we could actually start restarting our process as far as restoring. We were fortunate that we had a number of software vendors who also do their own off-site backup of our data. So we were able to get key systems back up and running. We were fortunate that our student management system and our financial management system were both hosted products so that we didn't have to worry about those backups. But the phone system got taken out. Cafeteria system got taken out. Our busing software got taken out. Every server that we use in any kind of classroom is gone. We're gone. All of our virtual servers were knocked out in one giant swoop. So it took us at least till Christmas to get 80% back to where we were, and we were able to get everything back for the most part, except for my transportation secretary still mad at me because she had to redo her entire bus routing again from scratch. So that was about the only thing we had to go back to ground zero on. So if you don't have cyber insurance, you need to go back and talk to your business manager, go back and talk to your administrators, and make sure that that's in place, because that was about a $60,000 ticket just in the forensics analysis that we went through that was luckily covered by insurance with a $5,000 deductible. The law services through our insurance provider were free, so we probably saved $120,000 and not having to pay the ransomware. We were fortunate we didn't have to reach out to the attackers at all to find out the amount or go through that process. Unlike some school districts down east, I know we have one that's coming up to our PASBO annual conference next month who had to pay $250,000 to get their student management server back. So they went ahead and paid the ransom. So weigh your cost versus risk.
Thanks very much, Sydney. That's
Yep.
kind of a great lead-in from what Frank and I talked about earlier this week too. And if you want to shed some light on the importance of being part of the MSISAC community and having some sort of insurance plan in place for your district as well.
Sure, yeah, and you know, luckily we're half hour away from each other as far as location goes, and we weren't hit with anything. But to also point out a little bit, last year I did go through the CDW threat check, which kind of opened our eyes a little bit. And what was nice with that is I was able to go to the school board with a detailed report and saying this is what we need to kind of get at and move forward with. And we were able to implement next generation firewall, endpoint protection, and then that all kind of stemmed because it's myself and one other computer technician in our school district, and to kind of keep up with everything else that we have to do in our jobs in schools. That I know I'm kind of anything that plugs into the wall, like I have to be in charge of, and I'm sure it's just about how everyone else is in the room. So after all that was done, I was able to get into the MSISAC community, and that is a free resource for all school districts, and that has been changing for me personally, knowing that I don't necessarily have to constantly go out and research or put that dedicated time towards that, because I get daily updates, weekly updates on best practices and securities that we can implement at our small schools. So yeah, it all started with the threat check for the CDW. So, and a little offshoot from Shanksville, we didn't have cyber insurance, and we moved forward with that just recently as well. So yeah, if you don't have it, get it, because you never know.
Thanks very much, Frank. Appreciate it. I did not ask for the shameless CDW plug either, but appreciate the insight anyway. So last but not least, Dino, Michael, anything you guys would like to add to the panel before we open it up to
Yeah, sure. So, talking about logging and all that, that was on Michael's slide, we had a customer that it was spear phishing. They got their credentials. They didn't have multi-factor authentication, even though a few months before we quoted it. So they got it cleaned up themselves. A week later, they got hit again. They ended up having their domain blacklisted, so they couldn't send email out. So our incident response team went in to help resolve this, to find out what's going on. It turns out they couldn't do a whole lot because they had no logging enabled, just the default logging settings. So I just wanted to share that, logging is important with this. Now they're looking at multi-factor authentication. That would have stopped the bad actors from coming in again with their credentials.
Right, thanks, Dino. Yeah, so last but not least, I know we probably have a couple of minutes left for audience Q&A. Is there anything specifically you all would like to hear from our panel of experts up here, so to speak? No? All right, well, hopefully we put a lot of info in your hands today. We really appreciate everybody's time. And again, if you need to follow up with us for any reason, you got myself, Dino, and Michael. We'll be here for another panel at 3:45. Just come find us. We'll be more than happy to chat with you. Thank you again.
Thanks.
Trust me, this weekend. You're gonna get to be a part of it.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
But yeah, I mean, we came back from break and Somerset got hit right before Thanksgiving break.
Yeah.
Turkey Foot got hit over Christmas break.
Yeah, we heard about Turkey Foot. And that's what, honestly, that's what prompted us to look into the insurance.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
Yeah, we didn't have the forensics guys do anything more than analysis. So if we got into file recovery, that would have been another $5,000 deductible. If we'd had them negotiate that $5,000, we don't know. We're like, but we have insured.